Hello everyone, welcome back to Clear Creek Solutions hydrology education videos. In this video, we're going over rain gauges and precipitation computation. So we also link a video. We did a different video on rain gauges, so you can check that out here in the top left or top right of this video if you want to learn more about rain gauges, but we're also going to go over it in this hydrology education. You can also get our ultimate hydrology guide by going to the description down below. It's 100% free. And you can download it for 100% free. Clear Creek Solutions is a software development company that has developed wwhm 2012 and many software packages around the West Coast and across the country. So let's get into the rain gauge information here. So to determine rates of rainfall over short periods of time, rain gauges are used. So different jurisdictions in the government will set up, or even sometimes private entities will set up rain gauges in different locations because it's really important that the amount of precipitation is measured, this rainfall is measured, because it's going to give us a lot of information about what kind of water is flowing off the surface of some of these locations and how we can best design stormwater mitigation facilities to combat this. And so by knowing as much rain gauge data as possible, we're able to gain a good idea of what is going on in that specific area. So we're going to talk about some common rain gauge types. The weighing rain gauge has a bucket supported by a spring or a lever balance. And then movement of the bucket is transmitted to a pen that traces a record of the increasing weight of the bucket. So pretty straightforward way of measuring it. Now here's an example of the weighing rain gauge here. So you can see that there's the funnel and outer cover, then there's that main collecting bucket, and so that's going to end up weighing the amount of water that's inside the bucket, and then there's that pen, that is the pen arm, that's going to be marking on this graph how much this rain gauge is weighing. So that's the basic concept behind a weighing rain gauge. Pretty simple, but effective way to measure the rainfall. Then there's the tipping bucket rain gauge, which consists of a pair of buckets pivoted under a funnel in such a way that when one bucket receives about 0.01 inches of precipitation, it then tips and it'll discharge its contents into a reservoir and bringing the other bucket under the funnel. So once one gets too full, it tips and then it's going to replace it with the other bucket here. And then a recording mechanism indicates the time of occurrence of each tip, and then being able to keep track of the time each one of those tips occurs, we're able to then record how much rainfall has fallen into the bucket system. And the instrument is well adapted to the measurement of rainfall intensity. So here's an example of the tipping bucket rain gauge. We've got the magnet, we've got a couple different, and this isn't every tipping bucket rain gauge, they can be designed differently, but here's an example that we had here. A drain hole, and then one bucket will tip when it becomes too heavy, making way for the other one, and then it's measuring how the amount of tips that occurred, and then through that we're able to gain a good idea of how much precipitation has fallen into the system. So microwave radar can also indicate the existence of rainfall, and the amount of reflected energy is dependent on the raindrop size and the distance from that transmitter. A calibration may also be determined from actual rain gauge measurements in the area scanned by the radar. And so this offers a method for obtaining data on rainfall distribution, which would be only roughly defined by the usual network of rain gauges. So it's more comprehensive than a standard rain gauge approach. So here's some pictures of some more rain gauge types. Like I said, you can also check out that video to learn more about the different types of rain gauges. We have the tipping bucket on the left, a more standard one in the center and on the right. So rain gauge data is very useful for hydrologists and stormwater modelers. So when it comes to modeling and designing these mitigation facilities, rain gauge data is going to almost directly reflect what sort of flow data we have given the land use that is in the region and the rainfall intensity. And then using continuous simulation, historic rainfall that we gather through this rain gauge data is going to be very important for our stormwater modeling and in using models to size mitigation facilities. Rain gauge data is often used in stormwater software such as wwhm 2012 and programs that model stormwater mitigation methods. So tracking and recording that historical rain gauge data can tell hydrologists about different stormwater events and what is likely to happen in the future. So based off historic rainfall events that rain gauges are used to gather that amount of rainfall, we can then predict what's going to happen in the future with similar events and design our facilities accordingly. So for example, in wwhm 2012, there's a map, and where you select on the map is going to indicate what rain gauge is selected, and then based on where that location is selected within that rain gauge area, there's a precipitation factor that's applied for elevation and wind and other parameters that are important when it comes to measuring rainfall. And so when you select a location on the map, that is the rain gauge used, and then that's going to be able to tell us. So the Clear Creek Solutions hydrology software uses rain gauge data for the modeling and rainfall data, and then this rainfall data is used to calculate runoff based off the provided land use area. So whatever area, 3, 4, 5, 6 acres, doesn't matter. That's going to be able to tell us what kind of runoff we're going to have. And then the rain gauge data is adjusted based on project location within the gauge section determined by the elevation. This is called the precip factor. So that is an overview of the rain gauge types and how it's used in modern day modeling, and we'll see you guys in the next video.